Morning, welcome. It's really great to see what we're up to now, nearly 270 participants. Oh, there we go. I should have like a little ticker online. It's brilliant to have so many of you joining us right from across the north of England and from Northern Ireland. Welcome. My name's Annette Bramley. I'm the director of the N8 Research Partnership. The N8 is the strategic research alliance of the 8 most research intensive universities in the north of England. And our members go from Lancaster, Liverpool, Manchester in the northwest, through York, Leeds, Sheffield, and Newcastle and Durham in the northeast. But this particular webinar we're hosting on behalf of the whole of the north of England and Northern Ireland. So for all of those of you who aren't from N8 universities, thank you for joining us. We're absolutely delighted to have you here. Our vision for the N8 is to be an exceptionally effective cluster of research, innovation and training excellence that brings benefits to the economy and communities in the north of England and beyond. And one of the reasons that I'm so excited about today's webinar is that impact is written right through our mission to deliver benefits to the communities and economy in the north of England and beyond. So other housekeeping points, please use the Q&A section to ask questions. The chat has been disabled, so you won't be able to chat. Please don't use the Q&A for chat because that just makes it more difficult for our EPSRC colleagues to identify the questions. But please do chat on social media using the hashtag Northern Impact, and please tag in N8 Research and at EPSRC when you do that. We'd be really keen to know who's here and where you are in the north of England or the Northern Ireland, and let us know what their useful takeaways and learnings, or maybe the things that you hadn't appreciated before are. It's always really useful to find out what people are finding as really useful parts of the presentation so that we can factor that into other communications, both for N8 and for the EPSRC team going forward. And as previously mentioned, but for those of you who are still joining, we have set up a little Menti to get the interaction going on this webinar. So you go to www.menti.com and you enter the code 1675578. And just like you to put in a couple of words to describe what you think of, top of head thinking, when you hear the word impact. Okay, so it's a very quick and easy, and you can do it while I'm talking if you like, because I'm sure you'll want to be paying a lot of attention to our EPSRC guests. So I've got to tell you that when we had the little pre-meeting for this webinar, we had a great chat with the EPSRC team, and they were telling us all about what we're going to be learning about this morning. And I've got to tell you that it's going to be fantastic. This is going to be a really good hour of your time. Some of you might know that up until 3 years ago, I used to work at EPSRC, and I've worked for many years with some of this team, and they have more than 3 decades of experience at the research councils between them. I know that they know what they're talking about. And so one of the things that I know that you're going to get out of today are some really, really great insights into things that you can do to build impact into your research project design and into your research proposals. And that's going to make your research better and your proposals better and make it much more likely that you get funded. I know that I'm going to learn something new about impact and responsible innovation today, which is going to bring my own knowledge up to date. And I hope that you all get loads out of it too. And I just want to tell you why I'm so passionate personally about research and impact, and why I think that this particular roadshow is going to be so useful to you. As I say, before I came to the N8, I actually worked at EPSRC for 20 years. And the last 5 years, I was head of healthcare technologies. And I've got to say, and I'm sorry to everyone in the EPSRC team, but that is the best job in EPSRC, head of healthcare technologies. It's even better than being the chief executive of EPSRC. And one of the best things about the absolutely best job in EPSRC is that intrinsically in healthcare technologies, research is about making people's lives better, improving patient outcomes, and improving people's quality of life. And all good research proposals in healthcare technologies have that impact and have that end use as an integral part of the research program design. And often people would come to us at EPSRC and say, how do I disentangle my impact from my research and put it into a pathways to impact document? And so I was really excited when UKRI announced this kind of brave new world of impact where there would not be pathways to impact statements. But I had one major concern, which was I really hope that people still ask for that money and still do those impact activities as part of the research program. I'm really looking forward to hearing today from Glenn and the EPSRC team about how that's working in practice, how you can do that, what kind of things you can ask for, and how peer review is managing to cope with those changes. I think that's really important. And I just want to share with you, before I hand over to the EPSRC, a bit of my thinking about research and impact, and the way that I think about research projects and impact is that a research project is a bit like an aeroplane. So let's just say that you've managed to get your funding and your project is almost ready to take off. So you're sat at the end of a runway, and I couldn't use the normal picture I'd use because of Creative Commons licenses. So I've picked up this icon of an airplane in the air. But imagine you're at the start of the runway. You've got your fuel, say your funding. You've got your pilot, your principal investigator, and your co-investigator team, your co-pilots. You've got your cabin crew, all the rest of the team that's going to help you work on your research, and you've got your ground crew, your estates people, all those other people that work at the university that help you get this project off the ground. But what you need is a flight plan. You need a flight plan so that you know where you're going to go during your research project. And importantly, you need to know what's going to happen when you get to the end. And this is where impact is really important to me. You need to know that when you arrive on the other side, that somebody's going to be there to pick you up, to take the knowledge that you've generated, the people you've trained, the learning you've accumulated, and take it on to the next step, whether that's yourself, perhaps you're just changing planes and going on to another destination, but it might be that others are picking this up and taking it and using it. And so you need to think about that, and who's going to pay for that, and how's it actually going to happen, and what can you do during your research project to make that more likely. So that's, for me, what impact is about. And I'm sure that the guys today are going to tell you about how you can make it as likely as possible that impact will arrive from your project, that it will rise more quickly, and it will bring as much benefit as possible to the intended users of your research, and perhaps benefits to those that you never thought would use your research. Okay, so that's about all I wanted to say at this point, and I'm going to hand over to the EPSRC team. Here's the agenda for the rest of the morning. The regional engagement managers are going to take over from me now, and then we'll have a talk on responsible innovation from the amazing Ben Rendell, and then impact in the new world and how you can factor it into your applications from Glenn and Dee. After that, that's about 40 minutes. We'll have a quick break, a chance for you to replenish your coffee, have a quick comfort break, and then we'll regroup for the questions and answers. Do put your Q&A in the Q&A section, otherwise I will need to be putting in lots of questions and answers. So do that, I'm sure you will. And then at the end, you'll see me again as we close it out and for the exit poll. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to hand over to Marie-Louise and Natalie.
Okay, thank you, Annette, for that introduction, and good morning, everyone. And just before our EPSRC colleagues in the impact team will take over, I would briefly like to introduce the regional engagement team, and of course, what our role is in helping to support the delivery of impact, social and economic impact, and of course, what the EPSRC, what regional engagement means to EPSRC, and what it means to the EPS community as well. Okay, I'm just trying to move on to the next slide. There we go. I've gone too far. There we go. So Yeah, so briefly to introduce the regional engagement team. So the team is myself, Marie-Louise, so it's lovely to be here. And I'm joined this morning with my colleague, Natalie. And we'll do kind of a double act to give a brief introduction, as I say, of the regional engagement strategy. So regional engagement team was a relatively new team for EPSRC, which started as a pilot in 2018. And since then, it has grown and it continues to grow over the next year or so. It was an established program just last year when I joined and Natalie joined as well. And forthcoming this year, we have 4 new heads of regional engagement to cover additional regions. And we were just joined by Natalie Cosey to cover the Southwest. But also I'd like to introduce this morning one of our newest forthcoming HREs to join following Easter, which will be Helen Niblock. So welcome, Helen. And Helen will cover the Northeast, Yorkshire and the Humber as well. So essentially, fundamentally, the role of the heads of regional engagement is really about connecting with our stakeholders on the ground and really engaging conversations across the broader research landscape, which includes industry and local governments as well as academia. So essentially, not only an aim to strengthen relationships with new stakeholders and also existing stakeholders, we really are about gathering knowledge from the regions in terms of looking at the research strengths, the relationships within the research landscape itself, and also the regional ambitions and how they fit in with national strategies and perspectives as well. And we're really looking about then increasing visibility of our regional stakeholders and also bringing about increased awareness of EPSRC priorities and strategies. So this is really to take an approach that would help inform EPSRC strategies as they develop so that they're reflective of the whole of the UK and also that regional differences are taken into account. And of course, another side to that then is that the regions themselves become more aware and aligned, and there are increased opportunities for EPSRC investments. And that way then that we hope that there will be more high quality research taking place across the UK. But now in terms of and aligning with the aim in our delivery plan, that's about driving economic impact and social prosperity. We're also very interested in the key area for the heads of regional engagement is also the role of EPS research in innovation systems that are able to derive local benefit. And not just local benefit, but the potential for deriving benefits across other regions as well. So in this way, we're constantly scanning and looking for emerging clusters of excellence and capabilities within the regions. And where there is potential therein for fundamental research to be uptaken by the local businesses or businesses further afield as well. And where we hope that we can facilitate those collaborations across the stakeholders. And in this way, these activities also help us to be able to contribute and address the place agenda from an EPSRC perspective, which my colleague Natalie will cover in a few minutes. So I should say that although we have our individual regions that we work very closely with, our team takes a whole UK approach to be able to provide information and understanding of the existing and emerging strength across the UK, and also the where collective regions have the potential together to strengthen the national proposition in terms of aligning with government ambitions. So in terms of fundamentally what we do and what we see as the core aim or objective of what our role can bring, it's really about bringing positive influence. And we mean about bringing positive influence through our knowledge and interactions, and that bilateral knowledge flow between EPSRC, UKRI and our regional stakeholders. So it's very much about where we see we can bring increased knowledge to our regional stakeholders so they're able to take on board the national perspective and EPSRC strategy as they develop their own strategies and their own regional ambitions and where it fits into the UK positioning. And also then that EPSRC become more aware of the regional differences and the challenges that regions face and how that may influence the strategies as they develop. So we're very keen, and also what we see as critical to what the influence we can bring is the key messaging that we get from our regions as we engage with you. So essentially the activities that we undertake in our approach in the regions is really centered around engaging regularly, as I said, with academia, but also local government departments and business bodies. We monitor, regional growth deals, city deals, local economic strategies, and where fundamental research plays its role within there. We're also very focused on getting across the correct strategic communications that are relevant to our regions, and also then looking about intelligence gathering. So we engage the community when we are looking to develop our own strategies and interventions. So essentially, really, we hope that our interactions with the regions will lead to them being more connected and aware, and ultimately lead to more investment in high quality fundamental research across the UK. And in particular, where those fundamental research investments can build local growth and local economies, and that will fit in then to our place strategy and our activity within that, which I will pass over to my colleague Natalie to talk a bit through.
Okay, so thank you very much, Marie-Louise, and I'm really pleased to be with you all today. I was very taken by what Annette said about building impact into proposals and thinking about where in the UK the impact of research can take place is another dimension that EPSRC has decided to make a key plank of its day-to-day business. So I'm going to talk about our place strategy. Myself, Marie-Louise, and the other heads of regional engagement worked collaboratively with our universities team last year and a very generous set of external advisors to help EPSRC make a decision on how place was going to be an integral part of our business. And EPSRC Council last December decided that from a pilot activity, we were going to have place thinking about where research in the UK is taking place, finding those nodes of excellence, building on them where possible, bringing the benefits of the research that's taking place to different places across the UK. That was going to become part of our business. And, one moment. I'm trying to go forward here on my slide, Dolly. One moment.
I think it's Glenn that is managing your slides, Natalie.
I do apologise. We will get there. Glenn, could you just press down once?
So you should have power. I just sent you over the power. So you should have a thing, a pop-up or something that said, take over control of Glenn's screen. Sorry, everyone.
I'm sorry about this.
No, it's fine.
You can control Glenn Goodall's screen, it says. I shall continue. So over the next 12 months, at the moment, it's important to say that our place ambitions don't have funding attached at this precise moment. And it's likely that over this coming 12 months, we're going to be working on some of the schemes and ideas that we have, and hopefully securing the resources to be able to make some of these initiatives happen. So as Marie-Louise has already said, one of our key commitments is to intensify regional engagement. So we have additional heads of regional engagement in regions. At the moment, so far, last year, I was the only head of regional engagement in England. I've been joined by a colleague in Southwest, and there'll be some more colleagues joining over the next few months. In those parts of England where there aren't any heads of regional engagement, we're actively looking at ways of gathering insight and intelligence from those regions so that we know about their levels of expertise. We've been considering some opportunities for secondment around that agenda. We also want to embed place into the core theme activities. I'll give you a bit of an example here. So the Henry Royce Institute is part of our core suite of institutes, and I am in the north of England working closely with the Royce Institute on their next phase of activity, and going to be over the next few months inviting stakeholder input across the north to think about the kind of place-related benefits that the Royce can deliver together. And that helps us as an investor, because it helps us think about the resources that a very substantial investment like the Royce needs from us to be able to do that kind of work. And that's what I want to reiterate from Annette's point. To be able to do impact work, be it place related that I'm talking about now, needs resourcing, and resources are available to be able to do that kind of activity. So please don't be shy in coming forward in your proposals asking for those resources, because we know that they are essential for impact to happen. The only other point I wanted to mention about our strategy is representation on our advisory groups. At the moment, just under half of the membership of our strategic advisory network and our strategic advisory teams come from Southern England, around about 10% from Central England. So that's one of the things we're going to be monitoring over the coming months and years. And of course, there is an opportunity for researchers like yourselves to get involved. I'm going to hand over to Ben now to commence the discussion and information sharing properly about impact. Thank you very much, Ben.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you, Annette, for the big introduction. I'm not quite sure I'll be able to live up to that, but I'll do my best. So I think, Glenn, I think you've got hopefully you've got management of
Yeah, sorry, I've just got a minor problem. Something's just stuck in the way and I can't get it to go.
Okay.
There we go, there we go, there we go. I didn't have any control over anything for a moment. I'm just going to reshare and pass over power just a moment. There we go, you are.
Ah, it's gone big again, lovely. That's lovely.
Oh, well, I mean. Okay. Oh, God. Right. I'm now passing over control. One moment.
Thank you. So, as I say, good morning, everybody. My name's Ben Rendell. I'm a senior impact manager in the impact team at EPSRC, and I work with the colleagues who you'll be talking to today. So I'd just like to do a little whistle-stop tour to tell you a little bit about responsible innovation, what it is, why it is important, not just for us, but for potentially everybody, how we can support you as researchers and also your research organisations to consider it, and just let you know about some of the recent work that we've been doing and continue to do to raise the profile and broader awareness of responsible innovation for all our staff and communities. Thank you, Glenn. Okay, so what is it? In a sentence, I would say responsible innovation is a thought process. It's there to help you as researchers consider and deliver the best research possible for the benefit of society. More broadly, I'd say innovations that may arise from the EPS research and training we fund have the potential to impact our lives in many different ways, and that can be both good and bad. But responsible innovation encourages everyone to pause, to take stock and consider if those potential innovations are socially desirable and undertaken in the public interest. So as a public funder of research, EPSRC has a responsibility to ensure that our activities and the research we fund are aligned with the principles of responsible innovation. So, and that's in order to create value for society in an ethical and responsible way. But it really is a collective responsibility where all parties, so that's funders, researchers, research organisations, industry and the public all have an important role to play. Thank you, Glenn. So in terms of how do you know when researchers and the communities are taking a responsible approach, it's when you take the time to think about what it means for you and your research, and also what your research means for the people around you and the broader implications. And it's actually adjusting that research accordingly to take that those potential implications into account. We recognise that, or you may be aware that considerations of responsible innovation are perhaps come more easily to some communities than others. It's a second nature consideration to areas such as ICT, obviously artificial intelligence, robotics, but it's fair to say that responsible innovation is relevant to everyone, and any research can benefit from being considered by taking this thought process and being considered through an RI lens. So our agenda here, and our aim of supporting this agenda, is really at the moment to embed these activities within the culture of our communities, and to ensure that we're well equipped and we're able to support you to do that. And we have this long-term ambition of ensuring that responsible innovation is business as usual for researchers, and I'll come back to that a little bit later on. So you might have come across responsible innovation already in your activities. For example, we within our CDT centres, there's a mandatory training requirement for students to receive training responsible innovation. So that's helping to provide a broad baseline and foundation of understanding. There's lots of activity being done in the within the ICT space. You may be aware of the Orbit service that we've previously funded. One thing probably very recent would be worth flagging to you at the moment is we actually have, you may be aware of the recently launched EPSRC Open Fellowships, and as part of our research culture aspirations, up to 50% of those fellowships could be you could use to consider responsible innovation or public engagement activities. So that's something to consider. Next slide, please, Glenn. So one other way you may have come across responsible innovation is you may have heard of the area framework, and this is excuse me, this is something that as part of our EPSRC policy, which has been in place since 2013, is all about the how to think about it, and stands for anticipate, reflect, engage, and act. So it really is a tool to help you consider responsible innovation, and provides a flexible and proportionate framework for researchers to apply to their research. Should also say an RI approach should also be one that is a continuous process. So it shouldn't just be at the outset of a project. It should be something that you should be thinking about as your research evolves and all along the way. Thank you, Glenn. So if I just go through the individual areas just very quickly. So anticipate. This is all about describing and analysing the impacts that may arise. It's not about trying to predict the future. It's just really exploring what those potential impacts and implications might be. So you can see there on the left-hand side, there's a few questions there to try and prompt thinking around that. Is the planned methodology appropriate? What will those outputs be? Are they socially desirable? And why are we doing this? Or why are you doing this research? Next slide, please, Glenn. Reflect is all about, as it says, reflecting on the purposes of why you're doing something, the motivations for that approach, and what those potential implications might be. What do we know? Are there any regulatory aspects to consider? Has there been any ethical reviews? Are there other governance considerations? What don't we know at this point? What are the uncertainties, risks, or areas of assumption that we might have made? And again, there's some questions there that might help you think about it in terms of, could it be perceived as potentially controversial research, and why might it be so? Thank you, Glenn. So engaging is all about talking and engaging with others in an open, inclusive way to talk through these considerations and really opening up that dialogue and questions to broader debate and engagement. So this is where the public engagement side of the responsible innovation really comes in terms of those dialogues that you can be having with whichever group of stakeholders you sort of like most relevant to your research and the broader public. Thank you, Glenn. So the last part of area is about acting, and it's really based on those previous steps I've discussed, is really using those to influence the direction and trajectory of the research and potential innovations that might arise from it. So, as it says there, what kind of training might be required as a result of going through that thought process? How do you ensure it can maybe socially desirable, and those kind of considerations? And as a general point, I would say the thing about the area framework is it recognises that different approaches may be required for different research areas. So it is very much a flexible and proportionate way of considering these issues. Thank you, Len. So conscious of time, this is just my last slide, which I referred to earlier, just to highlight again that EPSRC does have this long-term ambition, which was in our delivery plan in 2019, about how we really want to make business responsible innovation business as usual for researchers. So if you like, if we roll back, to when impact came in, how that has over the years has been established in terms of really as second nature in terms of thinking about these kind of considerations. We really want to make responsible innovation at the forefront of people's minds, and while the area framework and our policies for responsible innovation are well established, we know we need to be doing more here. So building upon what we've been doing with the Centres for Doctoral Training and in other activities, we're really keen on really ensuring that the understanding and awareness across all EPSRC communities is there and supporting you in that. So my last point I would say to you is that we need your help with this. We're really looking at the moment to generate that guidance and those exemplars to really bring responsible innovation to life for all areas. So if you've got any examples or things that you've been doing and would like to share with us, that would be really helpful so we can share more broadly and help really get the message across. Thank you very much. I'm sure there'll be some more questions later on, so I look forward to taking them later.
Thank you, Ben. Just to say, the reason we have that RI piece is just so you can think about more broadly about impact and kind of think about those roots. So obviously responsible innovation is something to think about, as is public engagement and all these other kind of pieces as well. So we just wanted to make it like a holistic kind of story. So before I start, I just want to thank Annette Bramley and also Stephen Parkinson from N8, who have been really helpful in making it so we can set up today. And we peaked at 531 members, which is really good. So you busted our record. So thank you very much. That's really cool. So just to introduce myself. So I'm Glenn Goodall. I'm head of economic impact at EPSRC. And I use the pronouns he, him. You can see that in my Zoom thing right there. Right. So now I don't have control. Oh, there we go. Sorry. So this is just to start on a fun note. So this is the delightful Magic Roundabout, which is in Swindon. You can come and see it. It's great. And the point of this is it's when we think about impact going forwards, we're trying to think about what is that roundabout of impact. It's really similar to what Annette was saying earlier about your flight plan and what you want to do. This is kind of a similar sort of thing as a good metaphor for this. So it's about, to tackle this, you kind of plan your route, and you need to plan up front with this as well, because it's quite difficult. And then you kind of need to execute your plan. You can make changes along the way, and you just get to your output, which is your kind of exit. Okay, so you need to think about those things up front, and there is wiggle room for movement in between. So there's no right or wrong journey. It's about the outcome that you want and how you get there. And this is kind of how we're going to be thinking about impact going forwards at EPSRC. So it's more about that life cycle of research. Okay, and this is kind of the basis how we're going to view things going forwards. So if you look on our website, you might have found a page that talks about the changes to pathways to impact, and you would have found these words. So this is our kind of agreed stance on impact going forwards. So it's about deciding what's appropriate for you, the academic. What outputs and outcomes do you expect from your research? Okay, and that can be like furthering knowledge, and that's absolutely fine. Okay, you need to think about what kind of partners and stakeholders might be interested up front. And again, that can be other academics. Again, absolutely fine. Okay, and then you kind of want to think about how you might maximize the potential of those outputs and outcomes. And these can be really simple things like filling in research fish, or if you have a lot of data, making sure it's flagged in research fish and other places so people can find it beyond your community. So it could be government might find this interesting. So how can you think about how you might flag it to people that may find it interesting? And the last two, the bullet points, the 4 examples, this is us kind of thinking about, we recognize that one size doesn't fit all, okay, and we need a system that works for scientists that are doing purely fundamental research, discovery science, all the way up to applied science, and then there's lots of people in between as well. Okay, so we need a system that works for all. So what we've tried to make it into is like you decide as the academic what's appropriate for you actually. And we're looking at this, what we've done so far with the loss of pathway to impact. We're going to revisit that later in the year and kind of think about what kind of continuous improvement we might want to make to our processes to make it simpler for you. So going back to that removal and thinking about impact beyond EPSRC. So at a UKRI level, okay, we recognise that the changes occurred at pace back in March 2020. And the councils have actually, since then, we've been working together to kind of think about how we might harmonise our language, how we might harmonise our approaches across disciplines, just to make it simpler from the outside. So you understand when there's a grant, an application, like a call, and it says something about impact, you understand kind of what we're actually after there, or what's expected of you. And then in terms of kind of stakeholders, it's worth remembering that this is still as important as ever to kind of government, essentially. So EPS research is extremely important for informing and shaping regulations and standards. It's really useful. And also thinking about other academics, how do you pass this on to others? How do you make sure that this stuff is kind of seen with impact taking sort of like, 50 years plus or minus 20? How do you make sure this stuff is still visible, okay, for the future? And then lastly, thinking about businesses and industry. So they were initially quite worried with the loss of pathway to impact, because that's their way to essentially sell their involvement with research. So they could use that pathway to impact as almost like something that they would write themselves and use internally to sell internally, for your, access to data and all sorts of other bits and pieces. So it's vital that you kind of include them kind of more so in the case for support. And I'm sure you are all doing this. And it might be that you might think about how to use their letter of support better. It might include things like the benefits that they might get out of this research and how, so they can use it, in a kind of in a better way, essentially. So a long time ago, it wasn't really a long time ago, Sir Mark Walport, our ex-CEO of UKRI, he challenged all the research councils to capture the outputs, outcomes and impacts of research and better tell our stories of research success. I say our stories, your stories. And also we're often kind of asked, what does good look like for EPSRC, or what does EPSRC want here? And for us, it's more about, we're more interested in ensuring you are able to carry out the activities that are appropriate for you and your research, okay? So this is our new philosophy. It's thinking about that life cycle. So that first point, it's back to the roundabout or the flight path, whatever you want to think about. It's kind of when you're going to put in an application, be thinking about where is this journey going? What is it going to be? And by thinking about that up front, you can plan best how to maximize your impact, the second point, both before and at the application stage. And actually Dee will be talking in a moment, and she'll be giving a little bit more information about how you might want to do that. And then by planning up front, you can think about what are the appropriate activities, impact activities that you may want to have on your grant, okay, to kind of propel your research outcomes further. And these could be simple things like having impacts as a work package, okay, and that could be knowledge exchange, knowledge transfer, but also, as I was saying earlier, it could be things around responsible innovation, public engagement as well is a biggie that you might want to be thinking about. And these are all fine. And if you're thinking about these kind of additional activities, do put appropriate costs. So this is still absolutely fine. You can put costs on grants for impact activities, We ask that you itemize them if possible, and make it clear to us. So when we review grants, we can make it clear, what are people spending on impact activities. And this is the same as if you're like at a panel or review stage. Think about, are the activities appropriate actually at this stage? And then this last point 4 is about communicating success. So as I just said, we're interested in the outputs, outcomes, and impacts of your research at any stage. Okay, it's not just the whole. I don't know. You might have had started off as a Friday project, which has turned into a spin out. Okay, and that whole story, you might say, well, that's the full package thing that you're interested in. Actually, we're interested in right from the beginning, you telling us about these stories. Okay, so if you have something that started off as like a whim and it's turned into, oh, I've got some research kind of funding on this, and oh, now I'm going into the IEA to think about some more things. We want to know the journey essentially to build the stories as we go, so that you can think about telling your EPSRC contacts if you have one. You can talk to the themes that you mostly interact with. There's your research offices, of course, that are extremely good, and they're keyed in and connected to us as well. Or you can also email our email address, which we have at the end, which I think is acceleratingimpact@epsrc.ukri.org. And this is also, we can collect those stories so we can plan for the future, essentially. So this slide, we're just thinking about, I think it's very easy to talk about commercialization and economic impact. And I think I do this as well. I often talk about that more so, but it's worth remembering that we cover the full range of, equally like we cover the range of research from fundamental to applied, we cover the full range of impact from knowledge, societal, people, and economic as well. Okay, so when you're writing a proposal, reviewing, or even sitting on a prioritization panel, you need to be thinking about what type of impact that research might generate and how best might that be maximized. Okay, so it could be something very kind of discovery science, and you might be just sitting in the knowledge side, and that's completely fine. Right over to something a bit more kind of discovering kind of transformative and emerging services, products, technology, all those kinds of bits and pieces, and you might be using a more wider breadth. You might be looking at regulations and standards data for that. You could be looking at the pipeline of people, training people to go forward. You might be upskilling people. It could indeed be spin outs and commercialization. Okay, and all of this is valid, and it's worth thinking about this up front, like what's the maximum potential of your research. Okay, so lastly, I just want to put a quick summary up because I think I've rattled through this quite quickly. But essentially, I think the key take-home message I hope from you all is to see that impact is still important. Okay, despite the loss of pathway to impact. When you're doing your thinking about your proposals, think about the potential outcomes and impacts of your research up front. Plan for impact essentially, and the third point is think about in your plan the appropriate activities and remember to resource them accordingly. Okay, so these are the 3 take-homes I would say today. So that's a very high-level overview of where we feel our strategy is going as EPSRC. Dee is about to cover more on how you kind of handle this in an application sense. But before that, I just want to flag almost as an advert. So this is kind of we're gonna initiate an impact deep dive quite soon at the sort of mid-April time. So this is building on our annual Pathway to Impact surveying exercise, which you may or may not have been involved with in the past. Okay, so this has been running since 2012, actually. So the deep dive project is about assessing how the EPS community, as well as our staff and our processes, have adapted to the removal of Pathway to Impact 1 year on. Okay, so it's going to cover the application, the review, prioritization panel stages of the process. It's going to look at our guidance, any web content, and additional documents. And what I mean by that is where quite often you might have a call that will have something like a user engagement, strategy, okay, which is almost like a very specialized pathway to impact. And we're going to pull out all of those and try and think about, well, actually, what do we want out of those kinds of additional documents, just to make it so they're kind of standardized, so you know how to answer them, so they're not bespoke to every single call. Okay, so we're looking at that. And we're also going to consider the kind of broader activities, which include public engagement, responsible innovation, and it'll kind of go into commercialization as well as a pathway, a route to impact. There we go. So it's worth pointing out with this activity as well, it's not about rolling back pathways to impact. It's more about providing us with the evidence for continual improvement. So we may or may not come to you. We'll definitely be going to research offices. So you can look out for that. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dee. I'm just going to give you the power, Dee.
Thanks, Glenn. Okay, all right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So my name is Dee Lodia. I'm a portfolio manager in the impact team at EPSRC. So following on from what Glenn's been talking about, I'll just be going into a little bit more detail about how to incorporate impact into your application. So the main thing to remember is that impact is a core consideration throughout the grant application process. And what you want to do is think about impact from the outset and build it into the initial planning stage. So think of it as a chance to integrate impact into the application itself. Just waiting for the slide. There we go. Okay, so from the start, when you start planning your new activities, there are a few things to consider. So first of all, you want to look at the objectives and the potential benefits. Okay, so what will those be? And also look at your potential stakeholders and any partners. Who's going to be responsible for doing all of this? And also think about engagement as well. So who will be involved in that engagement? Do you have any connections? And how will you just engage all of those different groups of people? You also want to think about appropriate timings as well. So when will different things be happening? And then of course, costs and resources, that's quite an important one. So make sure that you do request all of your costs. So add them up for all of your activities. The main thing to remember is that space is limited now. So you want to keep everything nice and concise and straight to the point. So just thinking about how to integrate impact, a few things to consider are looking at the track record. Okay, so looking at partnerships and who will be helping co-design, role of partners, what can different people do to increase the potential of impact creation? And look at the background as well, so put things into context. So you might look at things like the industrial, the policy, the societal impacts. Who's going to benefit and how? You also want to consider national importance. So this just allows you to demonstrate the focus on impacts. Look at your research hypothesis and objectives. So thinking about potential outcomes, and also if there are any measurable objectives for impacts, you want to include those as well. And finally, your program and methodology. Okay, so looking at impact related activities, these can be a wide range of things. So workshops, engagement, videos, training, sharing tools and techniques. You can be as creative as you like, but do look at the eligible costs in the guidance for these. Now, when it comes to look at your resources and management, three main things to consider here. Who's going to be responsible for the impact activities? Okay, so think about the role of your partners. What can they do to increase the potential of impact creation? How much is it going to cost? So definitely try to include costings. And if there are any resources which will help with impact activities, these should definitely be requested. Okay, so have a really good think about any kind of costings and resources that you might need. Now, there are some costs involved with different types of impact. So here are a list of examples that you might want to consider. So there are, of course, travel costs. So any kind of traveling to support engagement with existing partners. There might be partnership building costs involved. So just developing new partnerships, going to meetings, understanding the needs of users, anything like that. You also have people exchange. So what we mean by this is any secondments between industry, university, government. There might also be training costs for researchers. So this could be public engagement, entrepreneurship, media training. Also, you might want to engage expert staff, and these can include knowledge exchange professionals, consultants, business planning support, maybe commercialization professionals, research software engineers, anything like that that you think will be helpful. Looking at onward routes to commercialization. So what we mean is, any kind of development or design input. This could be, let's say, proof of concept, prototype, demonstrators. And then you might want to consider your comms as well. So just getting your research out there to different people, be it through, marketing, design, videos, web content. You want to look at knowledge exchange as well. So this will include engagement activities through workshops, seminars, networking events, maybe exhibitions. Also think about whether you need to include data management. So this means sharing of data sets. And then looking at sharing of novel tools and techniques. So just thinking about where these could be applied in other disciplines, other teams or groups. Now, when you're doing your application, remember that the whole removal of pathways to impact, it's all new for reviewers as well. Okay, so you want to think about what reviewers will be looking for too. What we recommend is try to include impact activities and milestones wherever you can. Maybe include it in a Gantt chart, for example. You want to flag impact activities throughout your case for support. And if you have a work package, and if it aligns to activities in that work package, then do include an impact heading. But if you have any activities that don't align to work packages, then what you can do is create a specific section and use it to tie together different areas of impact content together. Okay. Now, when reviewers and people on panels are looking at your application, it's important to think about what they're going to be looking out for as well. So impact will be covered under the equality criteria. So they're going to be thinking about what impact activities might be appropriate in your application. They're going to look at what kind of activities are included and whether they're fully costed, if they're itemized. They're looking at stakeholders, any partners that might be involved, and how they're going to be engaged. Okay, so try to bear all of this in mind when you're doing your application. Now, we are absolutely interested in your case studies at EPSRC. We want to know what you're up to, what the outcomes are, any examples of impact in your research. So, whether these are case studies or any insights, be it short, medium, or long term. Okay, we definitely want to know. And what we recommend is that, contact your portfolio manager or maybe the theme that you interact with. Okay, we're always interested, or maybe even the research office as well. Remember to always signpost your research data outputs on ResearchFish. Okay, and yeah, just a few things to remember. So when you're doing your application, you might say that it's impossible to predict the impact of your research, in the long term. That's okay. We're not asking you to predict the future, okay? But what we want to see is the possibilities, the potential. And of course, there's no expectation for impacts to be realized within the lifetime of a project. So we understand that this could be very, very long term, and that's fine. It might not be fully realized, but again, we just want to see the potential and the different ways that it could go. So remember, when you are planning for impact, okay, the main thing to remember is impact is still very, very important. And EPSRC are interested in the full life cycle of your research. Okay, so think about the potential outcomes and impacts of your research upfront, and think about any appropriate activities and resources when you're writing your application. So we have lots of guidance available on our website, which is just there. So please do have a look through. If you do have any questions which isn't covered in the guidance, then please do contact us. We're a very friendly bunch. So, contact your portfolio manager. Alternatively, you can contact the impact team directly. So that's our email address, acceleratingimpact@epsrc.ukri.org.